Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and in this episode, I'm pleased to bring you Nick Ferguson. Now, you probably know Nick from his time as a Denver Bronco. He kind of had a memorable play where he hit Tom Brady, Champ Bailey picked it off, and he ended that Patriots season. But Nick played a decade in the NFL, and more importantly, in my view, he spent 4 years trying to make it in the NFL just to get that shot. So Nick took the time to break down how he had that ridiculous NFL career that he put together. And if you didn't know, you can catch Nick on 104.3 The Fan, where he does radio out in Denver, talking all things sports all the time. Check him out on social media as well. But before we get into that conversation with Nick, I need to remind you all that we're brought to you by Team Builder. Team Builder works with over 500 high school football programs nationwide, as well as colleges and the NFL. So if you need to take a closer look at how your team weight room is run, what that program looks like, go there, show them some love, use the promo code VICTORY, VIQTORY, and you're going to get a free gift. And also, I'd like to remind you all that Lofa Tatupu came out with Zoned In. So if you are in the market for a CBD product, this, as far as I'm concerned, is as good as it gets, whether it is stress relief, physical discomfort. Check it out. Show him some love too. Now, here's my conversation with Nick Ferguson. I am pleased to be joined by someone I just found to be a Star Wars enthusiast with Mace Windu behind him, Iron Man on his chest, none other than Nick Ferguson. Nick, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for taking the time. It's certainly a pleasure. And I'm saying that knowing what you did to a certain Patriots season where you may have caused Tom Brady to throw an interception to Champ Bailey. And that being said, man, I'm still here in good faith, good spirits.
I always say you're here in good faith and good spirits. I mean, that was one of those plays that I would say personified, my career. And as I tell people, I say when Champ Bailey went into the Hall of Fame, I went in with him as well in the Hall of Fame because that was one of the plays, that they played to the audience. And it was a big play for a team, at the time. And here's something that was funny about that particular play. Normally in our defense, they never really blitzed me. They would only blitz John Lynch. So when I walked up to the line of scrimmage, the offensive linemen, they pointed at me and they said, well, 25 isn't coming, right? And I'm sitting there laughing in my head like these guys are not going to block me. But I had no idea things were going to part like the Red Sea, and Tom Brady was going to be standing right there. And it was a humongous shock to him. And when you watch the video, he's trying to slide away from me. But anyone who knows Tom Brady knows that he's not a real fast guy. He can't really run away from you. But he was able to deliver the ball, and Champ was right there to pick it off. So it was awesome.
And obviously, it's a huge play in your career, but do you also get tired of, like, I don't want to say being defined by that play, but like having everyone always bring it up? I mean, one play in a 10-year NFL career. I mean, do you ever be like, yeah, it was a good play?
Well, no, and listen, you want to be remembered for something. And
Sure.
to be remembered for something like that is always awesome because, if that took place against Baker Mayfield, no one would really care. But because it was against the Patriots, because it was against Tom Brady, it's a very memorable play. So for people to talk about that and look at my career and look at that particular play, no, that play didn't define my career, but it was something that's part of football history and part of Broncos and Patriots history that I can honestly say that I actually made that play happen. So, you know what? Any way that people remember me in a good way, I'll take it.
No, like I kind of alluded to, that's by region, but remembering you in a good way. There's certain regions that have a different view.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I belong to any particular region. But what you said about Champ and going in with him, isn't that true of every player? Because football is such a team sport. I mean, you can't do anything by yourself. There's no player in the Hall of Fame that made it there by himself because, all other 10 people, or at least 9, have to be doing something right for you to be in a position to, even do something.
Yeah, no one goes in. Well, they go in by themselves, but there's a bunch of people that have helped them, get there. Like when Randy Moss went in, one of the better wide receivers in the NFL, well, how did he get there? Well, the offensive line had the block. The running back had the block. By the way, the quarterback had to throw him the ball. So no one normally goes into the Hall of Fame by themselves. When I was a kid, they would say that it takes a village to raise a kid. It's the same thing. It takes a bunch of teammates and coaches to help a player get into the Hall of Fame. Those guys are definitely celebrated, but they look back and they thank all those teammates that allowed them to get to where they got to, which is in Canton.
Of course, right. Now, I can't help but having to circle back to what's behind your head because I'm staring right at him. You seem like a big comic book guy with Iron Man on, and maybe we'll take superheroes to an even wider sphere when we're looking at a Jedi like Mace Windu. Who's your favorite, man? Who's your favorite superhero? Who did you think of yourself as a superhero when you were on the field?
No, I didn't. But I always thought about myself in this way. Like I said, well, who's a superhero who is kind of an everyday man, right? But still goes out and he tries to save people and inspire people. And the first person that comes to mind is Batman, right? He had no superhuman strength or powers. He couldn't fly. He couldn't do any of those things. But he was smart. He was a witty type of person who could think at a drop of a dime. And he had that fancy utility belt, right? That everything was in that utility belt that he needed. So that's why I kind of adopted kind of a Batman Dark Knight type of persona, is because I felt as though I was a utility guy. I was my entire career, even in my 10th year, I still played special teams as well as starting, which is unfathomable in the NFL. And anything our coaches needed me to do, I could do. I mean, I was a corner in college, and I was moved to safety because people thought I was too physical. So I still could cover. I can get via what people call a box safety, where I understood how teams want to run the ball and blocking schemes, and I could play either free safety or strong safety. So the whole Batman identity and utility belt fit me well.
The way you describe it, it certainly does. And, Batman also happens to be loaded and has a butler and has some pretty cool cars. So, I mean, Batman really is probably the best pick.
Well, see, those things I don't have. Would I love to have, Bruce Wayne's money? Absolutely. I don't have, a butler, Alfred. I have a wife, but I would never call my wife or reference her as a butler at all. But it is still Batman. I mean, think about it. Here's a guy that dressed up in dark clothing, goes out at night and tries to, rid the city of crime. I mean, Cape Crusader, man. There it is in a nutshell.
I love it. Hard transition back to football from that. Because of course now, if anyone doesn't know, you're on 104.3 The Fan in Denver. Obviously not a usual off season with everything coronavirus related. It certainly has put a damper on, more than just the sports world, of course, but high level, what are you looking for in terms of what this team should really expect to be next year? With looks like it's the Drew Lock show is going to kick it into another gear. Draft wise, what's the chatter out west?
Well, the chatter here is what position to draft with the 15th pick. And the Broncos have so many holes to plug, and you can't do it in 1 year in free agency in the draft. You try to, but you can't. And the Broncos have kind of set themselves up in this position by not drafting and preparing for life after Peyton Manning. So in this draft, it's either offensive tackle and wide receiver. That's kind of the big talk right now. Which direction will they go? And then who are they going to take? Like at 104.3 The Fan, we have this thing we call the Bebop. It's a big board of possibilities where we list out what we think the Broncos should do with the first round. So I have Henry Ruggs the third. I have Kenneth Murray, linebacker from Oklahoma, on the board, and Andrew Thomas, the tackle out of Georgia. So with either of those players, the Broncos, I feel, can't go wrong at 15 because those are all positions of need. But looking at the new OC, Pat Sherman, who comes over from the New York Giants, what is it that they want to do? They get in those three wide receiver sets. They want to attack you down the field vertically. And looking at the Broncos as currently constructed, they have wide receivers, but they don't have the type of guys that Sherman's going to need to contend with, the likes of Andy Reid and Pat Mahomes in Kansas City. So the Broncos can go either way, wide receiver or offensive tackle. But I know they need to add weapons if this team is going to be successful in 2020.
Yeah, of course, and particularly with the young quarterback too. So you really want to make sure he gets protected and doesn't end up taking the beating that Andrew Luck took, for example. But since you just referenced Peyton Manning and the Broncos not being really ready for that era to end, and they're kind of caught in flux now, figuring out what that next steps is and how to rebuild. What do you make of what's happening, a little closer to, my neck of the woods in New England, where the decision was very clearly made by the Patriots to not pay Tom Brady. They wanted to move on from that now, and they're going to be looking to really not end up like the Broncos, figure out how to best, rebuild without having this period of uncertainty. I mean, just comparing what the Broncos have done to, how the Patriots have handled that aging quarterback situation. What's your whole take on how things have played out?
Well, it was kind of surprising not to see Tom return for what I would have deemed his final 2 years in the Patriots uniform. You get so used to seeing him after 20 years. But, the Patriots are in a better situation than where the Broncos were when Peyton Manning walked away. And the reason I say that, you have Jarrett Stidham. Now, Stidham, he doesn't have a large sample size because all you have to go on is his performance in preseason. He performed pretty well, so much so the guy that's backing him up right now, and Brian Hoyer, he beat out for that number 2 job. So now with the Patriots releasing Cody Kessler, it leaves a void at that third position. Because I say, well, there's other quarterbacks that are out there. Andy Dalton, Jameis Winston, and Cam Newton. Will Bill Belichick look to bring one of those veteran quarterbacks in? I don't know. But I know the Patriots need to get better inside that quarterback room because they don't have a guy who can, really step in and fill that void that Tom has definitely left. But, having Stidham there, being as though he has some familiarity with the offense, some of the guys that's there, Julian Edelman, and then also Josh McDaniels, that might help the Patriots out. But the problem is you have other veteran quarterbacks that's with the Miami Dolphins, that's with the Buffalo Bills, and with the New York Jets. So this is going to prove to be a very interesting year for Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots.
So, knowing everything you know right now, ultimately, I'm going to put you on the spot for the Broncos, but also for the Patriots. How do you see at the end of 2020, if you were to guess what the end record would be for both? Right now, what you know, what would you guess?
Well, for the Patriots, man, it could be 8-8. For the Broncos, it could be the same scenario, 8-8. What's interesting as far as the Broncos are concerned is, due to the coronavirus, with a young quarterback and a new OC, they can't get on the same page. So they're going to start. There's a possibility they can start out the season very slow. With Jarrett Stidham, not so much the case because, like I said, he knows the system somewhat already. He's familiar with the system. There's not a lot of learning he has to do. The only learning he would have to do is, getting on the same page with his wide receivers. But it's going to be slow. The Patriots lost a lot of players, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and that's where Bill Belichick is definitely, sore. So it's going to be really interesting. And don't be surprised if, one of Bill Belichick's, guys that came from his system, Brian Flores in Miami, somehow surpasses the master.
I wouldn't rule it out. I don't rule anything out. But if he does, I do think it would only be for a moment up until things get, what I would say over here is restored, have order restored in the AFC East. But all right, Nick, I can't wait to see how it plays out. But as much as I love talking about both the Patriots and the Broncos, what's going to happen next year, the fact that we're even having this conversation, comes off of the heels of, a tremendous NFL career on your end, certainly not my end. I want to get into how you were able to get through this entire journey because, everyone, know, oh yeah, 10-year vet, starting back in 2000 with the Jets. That's not the whole story right there. So before we can even get into you getting into the NFL, can you just lay down for us what it was like when you were in high school? Did you always want to be playing in the NFL? Was it always a dream? Just take us back when you're 16, 17. What's going through your head?
Well, at that age, growing up in the inner city, man, you're just trying to just kind of, survive every day. And for me, football was kind of an escape, right, of everything that was going on.
And this is
But
Miami, right?
yeah, this growing up in inner city Miami, being a professional athlete was so far removed from my mind. I mean, I was thinking more or less being a teacher or being a lawyer. But then, things happened in my high school career, college career that pretty much changed the trajectory of what I wanted to do. And one of the things that started that is my last high school game. It was against a division rival. And had we won that game, that would have put us in the playoffs. And because it didn't, it kind of eliminated us. And my future moving forward was a little uncertain. And with that, it made me start to think, well, what do I want to do? Is the football in the NFL or even college, the direction for me? But fortunate for me, I was able to go to a school in Atlanta, Morris Brown College. I was there for about a year and a half before transferring to Georgia Tech, and that's when everything, pretty much, changed for me. It wasn't one of those things where here it is, I was this blue chip player, and everyone wanted me as a player. No, I mean, I was a late bloomer in football. My mom didn't want me to play because she thought I would get hurt. So that kind of like held me back from my skill set. But, I was around some great coaches who, were really encouraging. And a guy named Marco Coleman, who currently coaches at Georgia Tech now, he was the number one draft choice by the Miami Dolphins. I ran into him during my early part at Georgia Tech. And he told me, he was like, man, you can play in the NFL if you want to, and you have to be willing to work to get there. And I've had so many other coaches, give me that coaching and that validation, but it wasn't an easy road. But it's one of those things when you have a goal and you figure as though, okay, well, listen, I can either go forward or I can retreat. And retreating only leaves you in doubt, right? Because most people, they listen to individuals in society that tell them what they can't do. They never think about what they can do. And it's those same individuals who watches one of their, teammates or friends accomplish something that they wish they could accomplish, and they say, well, they did not try. See, I never want to live my life saying as though I did not try. I'd rather try and possibly fail than never try at all. So when I look at my career as a whole, that's exactly what it's been. I mean, here's a barrier, here's an obstacle. Well, what are you going to do? You got a choice. Either you retreat or you attack it head on, you go over it, you go around it, you go through it. But you find a way to get it done.
Yeah, and that's that works for anything in life, let alone football. So
Yeah.
I mean, I love that. But just getting to Georgia Tech, though, I mean, if by your last game as a senior in high school, you didn't know where you were going. There was certainly no obvious football path for you. So how ultimately do you just even get to Georgia Tech?
Well, you know what? There wasn't a path. There was a lot of uncertainty, but I knew that I wanted to go to college. And, I had some relatives in Atlanta, and there was a school that at first I had never heard of. It was Morris Brown College. And I went there. I went to Atlanta with my brother, and I went to Morris Brown College. And my first year there, I didn't participate in any sports. I was kind of like helping out with the athletic department. Then I said, well, you know what? Why not give this thing, a try? I have my grades, so who knows where it could possibly lead. I played for the team, freshman of the year, and then I said, okay, well, there has to be more than just this, right? And then I said, well, there were two schools in Georgia, either Georgia or Georgia Tech. And Georgia Tech wasn't that far away, so I settled on Georgia Tech. And I just started preparing myself to transfer there. And if you know anything about Georgia Tech, great, Power 5 football team, but the education is important. If you don't have the grades, I mean, why even apply? So
Right.
I had the grades, I transferred, I walked on, and it was utter disbelief by some coaches and players when I kind of got to campus, like, wait a minute, you transferred from where to come here? And it's just like, it was almost like I didn't belong there. It's like, what are you doing? You shouldn't be here. So much so at that time, the NCAA had a rule that players that transfer from lower division to higher divisions, they made you sit out for a year. So I lost a year of eligibility because I had the audacity to think that I could transfer from a Division II to Division I. But that tells you, for me, if I set my mind on something, man, I'm going all in.
So it sounds like it wasn't even much of an adjustment for you to physically be up to par with actually playing at Georgia Tech, despite the fact that, not that you weren't committed to playing football, but like the fact that it feels like it came together fairly quickly without a whole lot of, I don't, you tell me though, how hard was it? I mean, was it difficult for you to just up your game to be able to play on that level, Power 5 football?
Oh, yeah, man. Every day was a challenge because you had coaches, players, athletic staff looking at you like, okay, well, you don't belong. So I had to quickly elevate, my game. And when you're in that environment where it is highly competitive, right? I've seen guys who even recruited guys, pack up their things and go home. For me, there was no such thing. There was no packing up and going home, because if I did that, ultimately I lost. I was defeated by the environment that was, created, saying as though, kids from lower divisions can't move up. So for me, it was like every day was a challenge. I didn't care what the coaches asked me to do. I didn't care who I was competing with. You knew every day you were in the fight when you lined up against me.
I love it. So I just want to skip fast forward a little bit here, just in the interest of time. So you go undrafted out of Georgia Tech, and what I alluded to earlier, where I believe it is in '96 that you sign with the Bengals after going undrafted. But can you just walk us through this period of time where you go undrafted and you break in with the New York Jets in 2000? But there's 4 football seasons, or maybe it's 3+ football seasons where you are going into the CFL, NFL Europe. You're doing whatever it takes for you to get your shot. So can you just walk us through that mental and physical grind, that relentless attack attitude, being Batman as long as it took for you to get your time?
Well, yeah, when you grow up in the way that I did, and knowing as though you don't want to retreat and go back to the same area that you came up in, it was like you had to do whatever it took. I mean, in that time period, Cincinnati, I was there for a short period of time in training camp, got injured, rehab, went to Canada, right? After going to Canada, I finished that season. So I still had an opportunity to join an NFL team. And I said, okay, what's the best possible way to do that? There was NFL Europe. So for a 2-year period, I went from playing NFL Europe, going to an NFL training camp, getting released, going back to Canada, and then repeating the same thing over again. NFL Europe training camp, NFL training camp, CFL training camp. So about 2 years, I played an enormous amount of football.
Yeah, because that's, for those that don't know, that is just nonstop. The CFL, the NFL Europe, they're on different time schedules. So you're literally 365 days a year, you're playing football.
Exactly. But that allowed me to hone my skills, get better, build more tape so teams could actually look at it and have more to evaluate. But also, it made me angry. It made me angry that I had to actually do this. And even when, I put good film out there, it still wasn't enough. And I asked myself, will this ever happen for me? And I said, well, you know what? I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to continue to do what I need to do. And fortunately for me, I got my first shot with Buffalo. AJ Smith, who was the GM at the time, saw me in NFL Europe, brought me to the Buffalo Bills with Wade Phillips. I was on the practice squad, and then one night in December, a guy by the name of Bill Parcells, called my phone and plucked me off of the practice squad for the Buffalo Bills and took me to the New York Jets. And then after that, everything is history.
And so that's how you found out. It's Bill Parcells calling your phone.
Yeah, it was like on Tuesdays are designated off days for players. So I was out with a bunch of my teammates for rookie night, And then I checked my phone. I got 13 messages from my agent, and he's saying, "Look, man, the Jets want to sign you." And I'm thinking, like, man, it's week 8. I'm settled in Buffalo on the practice squad. I don't want to go to New York, right? I've heard the rumors and I've seen, Bill Parcells yell at players. I mean, he's totally different from who Wade Phillips is as a coach. So I wanted no part of it. But then he said, "Look, you have an opportunity to go on the active roster. You can stay in Buffalo, or you can go on the active roster, have an opportunity to play, and have a bump in pay." And I said, "You know what? I finally decided." 6:30 in the morning, I was on a plane to New York City.
Now, getting called like that and having to just change everything just like that, the culmination of everything you had just gone through over the course of 4 years to get that. I mean, what are the emotions like as you walk into the Jets locker room for the first time, knowing that you have now finally made it? You are an active NFL player.
It was nerve-wracking. It was nerve-wracking because I had never been to New York City before. And all these players that I watch and I admire, Vinny Testaverde, Kevin Mawai, Curtis Martin, all these players were in the room, Marvin Jones, Roman Pfeiffer. And I'm like, holy cow, right? And I was like, now I have to prove to these players in this room that I belong. So it was scary. And then I had to deal with Bill Parcells himself, who puts a lot of pressure on his players. To give you an example, every day he would work out at a certain time. And it's usually the same time I would get to work. So I would always try to avoid him, because if you see him, it's this long conversation. But the majority of the conversation is about what you have not done. And I didn't want to deal with that. I didn't want to do it.
That's wild. But I wanted to ask about Herm Edwards, because I've always heard such great things about him. So, of course, he's your coach there for, I believe, 2 years. What was it like playing under Herm?
Herm was a great guy. He was different in the same vein as Tony Dungy and the Wade Phillips. Guys who didn't really yell. He believed in fundamentals. He believed in faith and family. He believed in getting guys out of the building, especially the coaches on Thursday. That was a designated night for coaches to be with their family. On Fridays, we came in early, so we were out of the building by 1 o'clock, because he felt as though players deserve to have the ability to take advantage of their free time. But he was a teacher. And that's the one thing I enjoyed about Herm. He definitely taught you the game of football, but he also wanted to teach you how to be a man and represent yourself off the field.
Yeah, and that's right along the lines of what I'd always heard. So how does that compare to Mike Shanahan when you get to Denver?
Well, Mike was football all day, every day. Mike rarely yelled. I rarely saw him use swear words, but you knew Mike was angry because his face would turn beet red. Right?
Anyone that's ever seen pictures of Shanahan on a sideline knows exactly what that looks like.
Yeah, his face would turn, beet red. But just like Herm, like Wade, and just like Bill Parcells, they demanded the most out of their players. And it was about gaining respect of your coach. And the only way you can do that is going out there and playing football. And for him, he really didn't care, when you were drafted, whether you were a free agent or not. All he cared about was establishing a winning culture, and that meant that you had to come and do your job. So, playing for Mike, man, it was totally, awesome, because it was about giving me an opportunity to make plays. And like I said, he didn't care where you were drafted. The only thing that mattered was that you kept your nose clean as far as staying out of the media for doing something stupid.
Right.
And your number was called to do something on the field, you came through and you executed.
Now, part of the reason why I really wanted to ask that is because since your playing days have ended multiple times, you've had the opportunity to, coach in the NFL. And, so, I mean, just to recap, Shanahan, Parcells, Kubiak, who's the OC there, will be your head coach when you get over to Houston. I mean, you were around a lot of very talented, high-performing coaches. How much did that play into it? And, of course, you weren't a head coach, but how much did the philosophies that you had seen work from these guys, how did that play into how you try to handle yourself and how you try to coach anyone that you are working with?
Well, it definitely factors in because, each coach has a different coaching style. Bill Parcells had that kind of in your face, your job was always on the line type of mentality. And with the other coaches, it was your job was always on the line, but it was about relating to your players, right? Coach Kubiak, just like Mike Shanahan, did not yell a lot. It was almost like, if he did swear, it was almost like Philip Rivers swearing. It was kind of like, gosh darn it, or something like that. Kind of hilarious. But it was just like letting men be men. Because some coaches, they don't talk to their guys like men. They talk to them like they're kids. And you can't do that. These are grown men with mortgages and wives and families that they have to take care of. So for me, I approach it the same way. How would I like my coaches to talk to me when I was a player? And in my time in San Francisco, I was around some great coaches there too. I mean, Kyle Shanahan was a head coach. My former teammate John Lynch was the GM. Adam Peters and Martin Mayhew, they were part of the upper management staff. Rand Carthon, his dad played in the NFL. He was part of that staff too as well. Jeff Hafley, who was Ohio State defensive coordinator, now head coach at Pitt, he was my superior. So I was around some great guys. And then I had the pleasure of coaching a guy like Richard Sherman. So imagine having, those conversations and those debates about schemes and fundamentals. So it made me sharper as a coach, but it was all about relating to your players. That's how you get the most out of them.
Yeah, and being involved in coaching, obviously you really like working with people, helping them get better at what they're doing, and how does that passion sort of spill over into other parts of your life?
Well, for me, doing outside charity work is very important. Growing up in the inner city and not seeing a lot of it just kind of pushed me in that direction. And I know earlier I told you that, football wasn't one of those things that I wanted to go into right away, but I quickly realized that the gravity, of the things that I can accomplish by being an athlete, and that's influencing people. So for me, it's all about, inspiring others to do, to be better than what that most people said that they are. So that's something that led me to doing a lot of charity work. And one a group that I kind of attached myself to, especially in my days living in California, was a more information. But we started a campaign going to a lot of golfing events and a lot of charity events to just kind of put the message out there, because we knew that a lot of kids and a lot of individuals and educators, they look up to athletes like myself. So why not carry forth a message that everyone can use, and that's staying off drugs. And the reason why it was important for me to attach myself to this particular group is the way I explain it, and I have no problems telling you this, but I mean, in my family, there are people who use drugs. There are people who died because of drugs. And then there were those who arrested and prosecuted those who used and sold drugs. So for me, it was, how can I take some of that family pain that I went through as a child and make sure that other individuals don't go through the same thing? So once again, it's educating people, because you can't make the right decisions if you are misinformed.
And what was the name of that group again?
It's Drug Free World, and the website is drugfreeworld.org.
That's awesome. I mean, obviously a cause that you will probably always need people like you to champion and help make sure that, the future, the next generation is able to actually, lead us by the time, they're old enough to do so. So that's great, man, that you are obviously someone that is willing to give and help others.
Yeah, always, man. I think if we all have that mentality, we can make our society in this world a lot better than we've all had to deal with. So it's all about giving back.
Definitely. There's so much about guys being able to talk about that next phase of life, and that's something that I'm really happy I'm able to do with the podcast, even if it's in a very, very small way. But talk about that transition and the dealing with the X's and O's outside of football, but particularly after football is more of a previous chapter than a current one. It's a
Well,
not easy. I'm sure you know better than me, but not an easy transition for most people.
it's not an easy transition, but it's all about preparation. You know, we all transition in life. At one point, we were 15, and then we transitioned to 21 where we could drive, right? Not a bad transition. There were some bumps in the road, but you just kind of learn to go with the flow. You know, going from being a player where you have done this one sport, this one thing all your life, and now for some reason due to injury, salary cap, or a team just deciding, okay, well, we don't need your services anymore, and it's just stop cold turkey. And for a lot of guys, that's hard. I mean, that's hard for anyone, but it starts with early preparation, thinking about, you know, what are your interests are, right? Who you need to contact while you're playing so you can open those doors. Because when you're a player, I mean, most people want you in the circle. After you finish playing, it's hard to call people and then knock on the door and say, hey, give me an opportunity. So it's about setting things up before you get to the last stages of your career. But the transition really, it doesn't have to be that hard. Here's another thing that makes the transition hard too. The people in your inner circle. What type of people that you had around you during your playing days? Did they love you for you? Or did they love you for the fact of, hey, what you can provide through this game and the glory and the bright lights of the game? If you can get those people out here in the circle, when you make your transition, it's that much easier.
That's awesome. Really a great piece of advice. Nick, we're running a little long on time here, so I want to be able to get you out of here. But that being said, it means that I'm going to have to ask you to run through the gauntlet. I got a couple quick hitter questions, man. I just need your knee-jerk reaction on a few things.
Okay, go right ahead.
What's most important? Is it having the number one offense or the number one defense?
Number one, defense, because
Because you're a safety?
Well, no, not because I'm a safety, but understanding the fact that, listen, the best offense is a defense, because if the opponent can't score, they can't win, right? I mean,
Of course.
We can apply it to any sport, right? So it's always defense and stopping your opponent.
Definitely. Now, did you have a pregame ritual that you stuck to?
Yes, I would normally get to the games, home or away, about 3 hours before anyone else gets there, because I wanted to walk the field. I wanted to run the stadium. And as odd as this sounds, I wanted to, you know, smell that fresh cut grass to kind of get me in the mindset of what I had to accomplish that day.
That's awesome. Now, outside of the one play we've already discussed, do you have a favorite football memory?
Yeah, favorite football memory involves another Hall of Fame, or soon-to-be Hall of Fame quarterback, and Peyton Manning. During my time with the Jets, we were playing them in a playoff game, and we beat them 41-0. That was kind of one of the worst defeats that Peyton Manning had. And in that game, I had my first interception. So very memorable for me.
Definitely. Yeah. Were you able to keep that game ball?
Of course I kept
All
that
right.
game.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, obviously, you've played with a lot of tremendous players, but was there ever one coach or one player that you just would have wished somehow you would have had a chance to line up with or play for?
Wow. You know what? Bill Belichick. I wish I would have had that opportunity. I got close to it, definitely having Bill Parcells. But I wonder, you know, what would things have been like playing, you know, in New England with Bill Belichick, playing with the Patriots, and also playing with a guy like Tom Brady.
Yeah, makes sense. A pretty good pick there. Now, what's most important? Is it the players or is it the scheme?
Oh, the players, by far. You can have whatever brainiac type of scheme you want, but if you don't have the adequate players to execute it, then, I mean, you're not going to look like a genius.
Listen, I agree, but we still have guests that say scheme. So I'm there with you. But there are some people that still take the other side.
Listen, I don't know who those people are, but to me, you can't run that scheme without the players that you have. I mean, think about Andy Reid with the Kansas City Chiefs. Yeah, he can employ that offense. He did it in Philly. You know, did it develop into a Super Bowl win? No. He did it with Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes, and he's a champion. So it's always the players.
And he made Alex Smith look really, really good. right before Pat Mahomes.
Right.
No, last one. I think it's the most important, given everything that you've been through, to grind for 3+ years just for a crack at living your dream, then to go on to have the 10-year run that you had. What is the best piece of advice that you would give to a young athlete?
Well, believe in yourself. Uh, Never give up. And most time in life, we always talk ourselves out of something, but we never talk ourselves into something. So you have to be able to switch that mentality. And when the road seems as though it's blocked, find another way. There's always a way, right? Because most people want to take that easy detour to the left, but maybe you have to continue to take the rough way and go straight ahead. But once you get to your goal, it makes it that much sweeter.
There it is, from someone that's absolutely walked the walk. Nick, thank you so much for taking the time. Of course, again, everyone can hear you on 104.3 The Fan in Denver, but where else can everyone follow you and what you're doing now?
Well, you can follow me on social media, Twitter or Instagram, or even Facebook. It's under the same title, at Nick Ferguson _25. Makes it easy for everyone.
There it is. Nick, thank you again.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.